Hey there, this is Women on the Brink. I'm your host, Chris Jeffrey, a registered acupuncturist and wellness advisor with a passion for helping women live happier and more balanced lives. When I'm away from work, I'm usually outside in nature, either walking the seawall or I'm hiking in the mountains. And like many of you, my life has been filled with moments of hardship, some that I thought I couldn't overcome and really left me questioning my own strength. But through these challenges, I discovered resilience, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose. So I'm here to share not just my journey, but the lessons I've learned, and to remind you that no matter what obstacles come your way, there's always a path forward. And just to let you know, this podcast is not prescriptive, it's an offering. So please take what resonates with you and leave the rest. Welcome to Women on the Brink. So today's topic is a difficult one to talk about, and that is drug addiction. Addiction is one of the most stigmatized issues in our society, and street drugs and prescription drugs carry an even heavier weight of shame. So when we hear the word addict, so many of us picture someone on a sidewalk or struggling in public. But sadly, that image only tells a small part of the story. So I did a little research and I discovered that across Canada, about 1.1 million people reported using street drugs in a given year. So that statistic is based on people who reported using street drugs. And in our province, British Columbia, British Columbians make up a big part of that number, close to 630,000 people. So that's about 1 in 8 adults have used street drugs in the past year, and approximately 250,000 British Columbians are on street drugs regularly. And yet most of that use is invisible. It's not just the people we see in, Vancouver's downtown east side or other urban cores. Those highly visible communities represent only a small percentage. So the reality is that the majority are actually our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, and our family members, people whose struggles are hidden because of the stigma that keeps them silent. And, because of that stigma, conversations about drug use often don't happen until a crisis hits. And for women especially, that stigma is doubled because women who use drugs are not only judged as addicts, but as bad mothers, bad daughters, or bad partners. And that extra weight of judgment can make it even harder to reach out for help. So that's why we need to talk about it. And today we're breaking the silence on the stigma of addiction to support the women and men who are using drugs and to support the families and friends who love them. So today I'm really honored to welcome Leslie McBain, who is the founder of Mums Stop the Harm, which is a Canadian network of families who've lost loved ones or have loved ones struggling with substance abuse. Leslie's story is both heartbreaking and powerful. After losing her son Jordan to an overdose in 2014, she turned her grief into advocacy, and she's become a really strong voice for drug policy reform, harm reduction, and compassion for families living through the ongoing toxic drug crisis. Through Mums Stop the Harm, she's helped build a community where families can share their stories, find support, and call for meaningful change. Leslie, thank you so much. Welcome to Women on the Brink.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
So can you share a little bit about your son, Jordan, and what led you to begin speaking publicly about the story?
Yes, Jordan became addicted in his late teens. He was mostly interested in opioid drugs. He had a really good life. He enjoyed life. He had lots of friends. School was not an issue for him. He was fun-seeking, fun-loving, intelligent young man. Um, However, he had ADHD and he also had dyslexia, which is often the story about kids, young people who begin to take drugs. He told me once that when he took opioids, he felt normal, that his brain slowed down and he felt like he could proceed. In fact, he, even within his addiction into his early 20s, he had his own business, which was wood stove installation and chimney cleaning. He was certified in that. He had a real going concern. However, really, in the end, his addiction was the you know the big wall that he couldn't get over. So, and he died in 2014 after our family doctor cut him off his prescription of oxycodone. There's a whole nother story there, but Jordan then went on a little search for at walk-in clinics and so on for the drugs that he felt he needed. Well, he did need. He was addicted, and he got them. Unfortunately, one day he took one of each of about 6 different drugs in therapeutic amounts, but that combination stopped his heart. So his situation was a little bit different than what we're seeing today. However, at the core of it was addiction. And if you don't mind, I would just like to say a word about the word abuse. We don't actually use the word abuse when we attach it to drugs. Abuse has a very negative connotation. And I mean, if one wants to argue, I guess you are abusing drugs as in not taking them properly. But we say drug use because it is, we're trying to reduce stigma, and abuse is a very stigmatizing word. At any rate, then, I mean, after he died, I was really not able to do anything for about a year. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't think my way out of grief, which of course you cannot. Um, I didn't know anything. I knew so little about drug use and drug addiction and grief. I mean, who's prepared for losing a child? Nobody. I always say it's the worst that can happen to a parent. I don't know. There's probably worse things, but that's my feeling. Um, After about a year, I met with I just again another long. There's so many long stories here, but I'll try and keep it concise. I met online 2 other women who are in Alberta, Petra Schultz and Lorna Thomas. And the 3 of us got together physically in Edmonton, and decided that we needed to speak out. We had all 3 lost our sons to drug harms. It took us months, and we got a website, and we got a name, and just proceeded as we could. And we founded Mom Stop the Harm. Our initial goal was to bring awareness to the problem, and also to save the lives of people who use drugs and support them by calling for drug policy reform. So that was really helpful to focus on that. We basically did not want any other mother or father or family member to feel the deep pain and grief of losing a child.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And what was it like for you as a mom to navigate the stigma around the addiction while your son was alive?
Well, I have the good fortune of living in a small community, and I've always been an activist in one way or the other, and also active in my community. So I had behind me a lot of community members who knew me, trusted me, cared about me. So I think I had an easier time with stigma in my community than many who are maybe in an urban setting and don't have those lots of close relationships. So for me, it was not that bad. Most people understood. Most people gave me and my then partner the leeway to grieve our son, to celebrate our son. And so for me, it wasn't too bad. Now, having said that, most other women and men that I have connected with over these years have not had that easy an experience.
That's what I hear. When we talk about addiction, it's it's important to understand that it isn't simply like a matter of willpower or bad choices, because addiction it's a complex health issue, and it's deeply connected to mental health, I think. And many people who use drugs are also living with depression, anxiety, trauma, and, ADHD, dyslexia, as you mentioned. And substances then become their way of coping or self-medicating. But, it's not just mental health. I mean, addiction is shaped by biology, by our nervous system, by stress, the social realities, like poverty, violence, isolation. I mean, things we're seeing so much of in society today, right? Let's face it. And so seeing addiction through this wider lens kind of helps us shift away from blame and shame and toward, more compassion and support and healing. So when you think about the 250,000 people using drugs, street drugs in BC, and most of them are invisible, what do you want the public to understand about who these people are?
Well, there's a couple things I'd say about that. One is that who they are is us. The people who are using drugs, street drugs, or even overusing prescription drugs, do it for one reason only. They begin for one reason, and that is because they want to feel better. That is the same dynamic that we all go through if we want to, um, if it works for us to have a martini or to uh, have a walk in the woods or whatever it is we choose to do to feel better. Sometimes the choice is the only choice people have, or the one that's accessible to them, is to try a drug. And we have to say that drug use, and especially, well, the drugs that are out there, do make a person feel better.
Yeah.
They soften the edges of life, really. So, and those people, like I said, those are us. So, our loved ones who perhaps work in the trades. There's a lot of drug use in the trades. People who have had some kind of trauma, broken leg, broken arm, some kind of illness, who have started on opioids, and it does make them feel better, but they do become addictive. So there's no moral judgment here from me or from any of us in Mom Stop the Harm around drug use. Drug use is, like I said, we have to start at the place where we say people use drugs to feel better.
Yeah.
End of story in terms of moralizing. So, that is why people take drugs. That is why people often continue, but addiction happens. It is a physiological state, and so it can be viewed as a health issue.
Exactly. And yet we do stigmatize it so much. And how does that stigma, silence families? What impact does that have on people who are looking for support?
Oh, it has a tremendous impact for several reasons. One is the drugs that people are taking. We're not talking here about people who are using the drugs prescribed to them in a responsible way. We are talking about people who are using street drugs or using prescription drugs that they also get on the street or from wherever.
So self-prescribed,
You self-prescribed, you could say. Yeah.
right?
The stigma is that this drug use and these drugs are illegal. First of all, they're illegal. So, when anybody is doing anything illegal and it's visible or known, there's a stigma attached to that. But particularly to drugs, and we're eliminating when we talk about this. You and I, Chris, we're talking about street drugs. We're not talking about alcohol. We're not talking about tobacco. We're not talking about other things that people get addicted to, sex or pornography or gambling. We're talking about just this one thing.
Yeah.
Drugs such as heroin and cocaine have been illegal and stigmatized for 150 years. I mean, we're still living in prohibition, the war on drugs. That's really ingrained in us in a way through media and just through history. Back in the 20s, when our government and other governments tried to take make alcohol illegal. It was called prohibition. The same dynamic happened then as is happening now, which is gangs overtook the marketplace. The substances were toxic. People died. There were murders, all kinds of bad things happened during Prohibition. Those same things in a different it's a different world today, but the same dynamic exists. So the stigma just continues on, and then there's a lot of fear. We have this vulnerable population of unhoused people who are seen by the public, and they use drugs because why wouldn't you if you don't have a house and you're getting shuffled around and you're cold or you're too hot? People use drugs. That's what the public sees. So that's what they ask their politicians to work on, to just, you know,
Make it
get
go
rid of,
away.
make it go away.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Hide it. Yeah, and that's a really good point you make about, prohibition and alcohol and drugs have had this stigma for a very, very long time. So Mom Stop the Harm now has really grown, hasn't it? It's a national movement.
it is. Mhm.
Yeah. What do you think families find in this community that they can't always find elsewhere?
Mhm. Well, for one thing, well, there's several things, but for one thing is when a person, a mom, and we're called Mom Stop the Harm, but we invite and welcome dads and uncles, grandmas and grandfathers, and friends and siblings. Um, People can remain somewhat anonymous from their communities, and they can speak to us, people who understand, who have compassion, know what they're going through. We've started two kinds of support groups, one called Healing Hearts for those family members, especially moms who have lost a child or a close loved one, and another series of support groups called Holding Hope, which is for people who have their loved one who is using substances, have substance use disorder, is what we call addiction these days, uh, so that they can have the support they need in whatever it is they need for their person who's presenting with those problems. So we offer support. It's free. We also people who join can see what we're doing, trying to petition government for better drug policies. And we have conferences, we have learning webinars, and so on. So there's lots of things that go on at Mom Stop the Harm. There's probably, I'm not sure exactly the number, but across Canada, probably somewhere between 3 and 4,000 of us who are in the membership of Mom Stop the Harm now.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, yeah.
Truly incredible. So for people who are listening today, like, maybe they're using drugs, maybe they're worried about a family member or, a partner,
Mhm.
what words of hope would you offer to them?
Hope is hard to come by these days. I'll be honest with you. I've been working for 9 years on trying to uh, convince politicians that we need a safer drug supply for those people who are addicted. Um, we call it prescribed alternatives. Um, we did get somewhere, and now we're losing ground. Um, we're trying to have governments, all levels, all provincial and federal governments, increase the number of facilities for recovery that are evidence-based and subsidized. Um, we need that. We have, as you mentioned, just these hundreds of thousands of people who may want treatment, and there's no matter what the government says, no matter what they spin out, there is not enough evidence-based. We're all about science. We wanna see the numbers. We wanna see what these, recovery facilities are doing, how they're proceeding, what the outcomes are, before would we don't usually suggest, recovery facilities, any particular ones, by the way, because we leave that to the individuals. But what we're trying to do is get more, as I say, more evidence-based, and also people who are searching for an answer, searching for recovery. We know that every single person has a different pathway to recovery. So there needs to be different pathways out there. And this is not the governments are not taking this problem seriously enough to look into it, to provide alternatives. There's not enough doctors who are versed and skilled in addiction medicine. There's so many reasons why it's hard to reach out, because you can reach out and not find anything. I mean, that's really the dynamic here.
Yeah. I think that's an important point that you make too, that we need to understand that everybody's got a different pathway and not everybody's going to go with the guidelines by Health Canada.
Right.
I mean, it's not that simple. And I think a good example of that is the work that Gabor Mate has done. He worked in Vancouver's East Side for many, many years. And I think Health Canada had a real problem with some of his methods. And so he had to leave his practice as a doctor and go on to do other work. But I agree. I think that we have to be really very open-minded about um, pathways for people. So, I mean, that is a good suggestion in itself that can provide hope, is that there isn't just one model out there for everyone. So, what would you say then, like to the policymakers or the leaders who still see addiction primarily as a criminal issue and not as a health issue? How do we change that?
Mhm.
That's a big part of the stigma, I think.
Well, it is. Obviously, decriminalization, which I worked on for a couple of years myself within a committee, decriminalizing people who, and this is what decriminalization is, by the way, people misunderstand it sometimes because of media. Decriminalization is decriminalizing people who possess a small amount of illicit drugs. It doesn't mean decriminalizing drugs. It means
Right.
criminalizing the person. So the person, if they are found by police or whatever with drugs on them, will not go into the criminal justice system. That was a big one. This helps reduce stigma. But the reason, so policymakers didn't like that because the public didn't understand it. And it was, in my opinion, it was the government, and we're talking about BC here, but it would go across the board, did not explain it well. And it's a government policy at the end of the day. So they didn't explain it well, so the public didn't understand it. They thought it was just going to be a big drug free-for-all, and that's not at all what it was. And
Yeah.
its secondary intent was to reduce stigma. Now, you can reduce stigma by, the government can, and I've met with ministers many, many times over the last 9 years, both in Ottawa and in BC. Um, Most of them actually know the truth, which
Yeah,
is
I think so too.
really ironic. They know the science, they know what's going on. They know that organized crime is providing the marketplace. But what they do then is, which is comes, becomes has become a kind of a common story, is they're using law enforcement rather than upping all the harm reduction efforts that we need to stop the deaths, to help people get into treatment, to have treatment available, and so on.
And, I think the thing is the stigma around all of this, it begins with our policymakers because then it does trickle down to the healthcare workers. Have you seen much of a change in hospitals and facilities around the stigmatization with healthcare workers?
There is a slow change for the better. People in the ER, people who are healthcare providers are starting to get the awareness that the people that they see in whatever context, whether it is the ER or whether it's in the office or in walk-in clinics, are starting to understand that there's a way to treat people who are coming in and presenting with addiction and have maybe other health concerns as well. The really cruel thing that happens regularly is a person might come in with something that is tangentially attributed to drug, or could be attributed to drug addiction, such as wound care or heart conditions or other health conditions. So if they come in, they are triaged, and the fact that they are addicted is not taken into account. So there is a person in there waiting in, let's say, in the waiting room of the ER, or waiting for treatment, but they can't get the drugs they need, so they leave, because people who are addicted need a certain amount of drugs on a regular basis to not go into withdrawal and become very ill. This is starting to come into the consciousness of healthcare workers.
And I mean, isn't this the problem that we see within our culture around Western medicine, is that we're, we're only treating one symptom. We're not looking at the bigger picture most of the time.
Yes, absolutely.
So, like for yourself, how do you personally stay grounded and positive when you're working in a very difficult space?
At this point, I thought about this question a lot. My grounding is my work, largely. I mean, I have other activities that I do that are social and so on. But the work, I have a mission, I have a vision, I have a goal. These things are what keep me grounded. Every day, I should mention too, and to your listeners as well, I work as the family and caregiver lead for the BC Centre on Substance Use in Vancouver, which is an amazing organization. It's primarily research, but they write guidelines for government. Government doesn't always pick up on it, but that's what they do, and they're evidence-based. I was going to say that the work there grounds me. We have a family committee. We inform. We try to inform research areas, and we also are now working on, for instance, we're working early intervention, education in schools, education on drugs, not the just say no, but mental health, mental wellness, and so on, things that can lead to substance use. But I was going to also say the BCCSU has on their website some resources for parents or for people who are in addiction. So it could be, if you could add that to your list of resources, BC Centre on Substance Use. And some of that our little committee has informed. So anyway, I guess, again, in answer to your question, what grounds me? Having a goal grounds me. And I would say to everyone who's experiencing grief from a death or concern and stress about a loved one, the education of ourselves is very, very powerful. And it helps a person feel engaged and gives some strength to everyday worries and grief. Education on what is really going on. And once a person sees what's really going on out there, which is, as I mentioned, that we are allowing organized crime to supply the marketplace with these toxic street drugs, which kill people, about 5 or 6 a day here in BC, because the medical system hasn't gotten up to speed, or neither has the government gotten up to speed on supporting people who use drugs in a good and healthy way.
I agree. And, I think you brought up a really good point here, and that is prevention. And when we talk about people who are being diagnosed with ADHD and things like dyslexia, and we know that people who have these conditions are going to gravitate more to using substances. What are we doing? And because I only just found this out myself, that, we should be having these conversations with people who are neurodivergent. They run the risk. And so do you see that happening within schools and beyond?
Not yet. They're taking some steps. There is an awareness now that you've probably seen this or read this, that the government has rolled out naloxone in educational facilities. Now, this seems like, well, it is just a small drop in the bucket of what needs to be done, but there is awareness now that people may overdose or have a toxic drug reaction on site, in the educational facility. So that's these systems becoming aware of the situation. That's the first step. What we are looking at is, again, the upstream prevention, which is we are advocating for mental wellness and awareness of mental wellness for children, even in kindergarten age, nothing about drugs, but just about mental and emotional wellness and coping mechanisms and so on. The government has just recently, the Ministry of Health here in BC, just recently jumped on the program. It's called Provincial. It was created in Canada. It's a Canadian program for older teens, well, 15 up to 18, middle school and high school. And it helps kids understand their own mental health and their own proclivities and their own needs for excitement or for privacy or whatever. It's kid driven. I love it. I think it's a great, great program. So I'm encouraged by that. This will help kids to have other resources rather than turning to substances. It used to be back in the day, kids would smoke pot, they still do, but would take other drugs, but those drugs didn't kill them, and
Yeah.
those drugs didn't addict them usually. So we're working hard to help educators and parents understand how to be aware of their kids' mental health and emotional health and how to respond.
And sorry, where is Preventure found?
You Google it. It's Preventure, prevent and URE, Preventure program.
Yeah.
It was created by Dr. Patricia Conlon in Quebec years ago. Probably 15 years. I've been I've been talking about it for many years, and have not been very successful in the uptake. And I don't know whether I've met with Josie Osborne twice, and we have back and forth emails. I suggested it, but I don't know if she took my suggestion, but at least it's in there. And it's, yeah, people can look it up. It's a lovely program. It's not very accessible to individuals. You have to have a trainer, and so on. But a person looking it up could at least get the idea, the philosophy, and how it helps. So I'm happy to see that program being at least talked about in Ministry of Health.
Yeah, and I'd like to see more of it in schools and just be a common conversation that we have with young kids anyway, that there are other alternatives to deal with all the variety of mental health issues that we have. We just don't talk about these things, and we don't take it seriously that our mental health is just as important as our physical health, and I don't know why in 2025 we don't realize that. We do on some levels, but it should be integrated into just everyday, into schools, into hospitals,
Yes.
in my opinion.
Oh, I agree.
So this is a lot to take in, and I love this conversation. What is one small action that each one of us can do to reduce stigma and support people who are using substances, like
Mhm.
within our families or our workplaces, and just even in our communities?
Okay, because I was thinking before I answered that question, or do I go to answer that question? I was thinking about the folks who might be listening who are have substance use disorder, who are addicted and who are struggling with that. And so this sort of rolls into that as well. I have never yet met a person who is living with addiction who wants to be there. Nobody wants it. People are afraid to reach out for help because they're afraid that they will go into withdrawal, that they won't have this even option to feel good for a little while. I mean, it's a scary thing to reach out and to have a goal of not using drugs. It's scary, especially in the milieu that we're in, where we don't have enough professionals, we don't have enough resources to help that person. So I just want to acknowledge that. And the action there's several actions that we can all take. One is, if you know someone who is experiencing substance use disorder or addiction, who is struggling, and you have their trust, talk about it. Get it out in the open. Make sure that anyone who you talk to who is having that issue realizes that I don't think this is a moral issue. I know it isn't a moral issue. I know it's a health and mental health issue. And to reduce the stigma, to get morality out of it. Learn how to say the right things. How can I help? Not you should. Just sort of common sense things. But I mean, I experienced that myself when my child was in addiction. People telling me, "Oh, you're codependent, or you're enabling, or you're whatever, you should have done this or you should have done that. Not helpful.
No, more
Not
shaming.
it's shaming and blaming, and it is, it's just simply not helpful. In terms of other things that people can do is once a person gains the awareness of the dynamic of bad drug policy, is to connect with their MLAs, to connect with their MPs, to find somebody in a policymaking position who is sympathetic, who understands. And if they don't understand, then take it upon oneself to educate them. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I'd say that all the time. It's free. It can be done. It seems a little scary at first, like, "Oh my gosh, how can I write a letter to that person that makes sense?" Just do it. I
yeah,
mean, what's the worst that can happen? You'll get the worst that can happen is you won't hear anything back. The second worst thing that'll happen is you'll get some canned answer back, but just keep doing it. That's my advice. That's what I do that all the time. I write letters every day. I at this point, I have a voice. I Media will reach out to me, but it's taken a long time to gain that trust and to be able to speak truth to power, as it were.
You brought up some really important points here that the one and only reason that people want to take drugs is because they want to feel better. And so when we look at it from that lens, we see that these people, when they were 5 years old, they didn't say to themselves, hey, when I grow up, I want to, use substances. That's not the way it happens. So the way we have to approach it is with a more compassionate lens and with empathy, and try and see things from where the root of it stemmed from. Where did it begin? And work our way forward from that, I think, rather than just passing judgment that this is what they want,
Yeah, this is what they chose.
what
No,
they chose exactly.
like you say, nobody ever woke up one day and said, "I think I'll be." People do wake up and say, "I need something to feel better.
Yes.
I need something," and that's where it can begin. Hopefully, with education from a young age, as I said, around mental wellness and emotional wellness and resources, people can pick something else other than substances, especially the toxic drug market. But if people are in the toxic drug market, and they want to do some advocacy, we really, really need all harm reduction activities. We need a prescribed alternative to the toxic drug crisis, toxic drug market. And we need to keep people alive. I mean, that's Mom Stop the Harm bottom line. That's why we
People alive.
began this. We just want to keep people alive. Dead people don't recover. And we experience that and we know that. Let's first of all keep people alive, and only the policymakers can make those changes, and also physicians, family physicians, walk-in clinics, all the medical system need to know how to do that. So that's what we need to advocate for.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you, Leslie. I mean, thanks so much for your honesty and your dedication, your strength to changing the way that we see and respond to addiction. And thanks for sharing your voice and Jordan's story, because that also reminds us that behind every statistic is a real person and their family, and that love never ends.
That's right.
And I want to close with the words of Jen Howard, who is a friend of yours and mine, and because she's also a member of Moms Stop the Harm, who lost her son Bobby to drugs. And she said, sometime in the future, we are going to look back on this period of time with great shame at the lack of real, meaningful action by political decision makers. And I couldn't agree more, right? Those words land heavy, and they should, because what we are living through is not just a series of individual tragedies, but a public health crisis that deserves urgency, compassion, and action. So, to all
That's
you listeners, if you feel called, please get involved and lobby those policymakers. And if you are using drugs, or if someone you love, please know you're not alone. There is a community here for you. There's people like Leslie McBain and the families of Moms Stop the Harm who are standing up and speaking out and demanding change. And there's also support groups like Healing Hearts, for people who have lost their family or friends. Another support group is for people who are dealing with loved ones or friends who are struggling, called Holding Hope. And as Leslie pointed out, here in BC, we have the BC Centre on Substance Use. So I'm going to put all of those links to all of those places in the show notes. And I just want to say the thing that I've learned from doing this episode of Women on the Brink is that the stigma of addiction keeps people silent. And the silence is really a big part of what's fueling so much of the suffering. And I think that if together we can choose compassion over judgment and we can create openings for healing, and we talked about the pathway for the healing is different for everyone, and for connection and for life. I mean, that's really, as Leslie pointed out, that's really what we're trying to do here is preserve life. And that's where the change begins. So for all of you listening, I hope this conversation has softened some of the harshness that stigma creates, because addiction is not about weakness or bad choices. It's about pain and it's about survival and the human need to cope. So let's keep these conversations going and really try to stand together to make our community safer, kinder, and filled with more dignity for everyone. So just a note related to today's discussion, Leslie wanted me to include some key ways to support harm reduction for people impacted by substance use. And these include access to safe consumption sites, prescribed alternatives, ongoing education, and the decriminalization of substance use. These measures help reduce harm and save lives and create a more compassionate, informed approach to addiction. And I just wanted to share for anyone looking for resources to better understand substance use and help reduce its stigma, I highly recommend 2 books. And one is In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate, and What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. Both books provided me with a deeper insight and compassion and a practical understanding of the complex factors that influence addiction. Thanks for joining, and I want you to know that this isn't just a podcast, this is a movement. So share this information with your friends, and let's go, ladies.